Welcome to the Homeschool Counseling Network podcast, brought to you by the homeschoolcounselingnetwork.com, a website devoted to connecting homeschooling families with free resources in the areas of academic advising, counseling, testing, therapy, and tutoring to inspire, inform, and improve lives. In this podcast series, we chat with professionals in education, mental health, professional coaching, and therapy to help families on their home education journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show. My name is Kimberly Bennett, and I am your host. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for giving us a listen. A little bit about me. I am a licensed professional counselor of over 20 years, and I have been a homeschooling mom for 5 of those years. I am also an advocate for mental health and homeschooling children with learning differences. For more of my story and background, feel free to listen to episode 1 or check out my website at thehomeschoolcounselingnetwork.com. Disclaimer. While I am a licensed mental health professional, the content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered educational, medical, mental health, or therapy advice. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the management. The presenter is simply presenting their views and welcomes any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Well, today I have with me Dr. Sue Hahn. Dr. Hahn is a licensed clinical psychologist practicing in both Texas and Illinois, balancing her role as a homeschooling parent of 2 preschoolers with her position as a part-time private practice clinician with her practice, maplepsychological.com. Dr. Hahn brings a unique perspective to her work. Prior to establishing her private practice, she served as the Assistant Director of Mental Health Services at Disability Resources and Educational Services of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. In this capacity, she specialized in supporting college students diagnosed with ADHD, learning disabilities, and ASD, assisting them in diagnosis and management. Throughout her graduate school training, Dr. Hahn also gained valuable experience working with young children and families, offering therapy and conducting psychological and cognitive evaluations. Dr. Hahn's current focus lies in ADHD, where she utilizes her background to aid adolescents and adults in obtaining accurate diagnoses and effectively managing symptoms. Drawing from her personal experience as a homeschooling parent, Dr. Hahn is deeply committed to equipping homeschooling families with the knowledge and resources necessary for success. Well, hello, Dr. Hahn. Thank you so much for
Hello.
being with us today. We are
Thank you for
very
having me.
excited.
Thank you.
This is a
Yeah.
topic that a lot of parents want to ask about, and
Yeah.
especially you're a homeschooling parent as well. A lot of parents have, and well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but a lot of parents have questions as to what is an evaluation? Do I need to have my child given a diagnosis for this?
Sure.
Am I the only one on my IEP committee since I'm the homeschooling parent? Lots of different questions today. But to start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, you provided all the background information about me. But yes, I am a homeschooling mom of 2. My kids are 3 and 5. So they're young, but I spend my days at home with my kids, homeschooling, and then on the evenings and weekends, I see clients virtually. I do have a lot of most of my experience. Have been working with college students, but as you've mentioned, I have worked with young children and families as well. I've always loved doing evaluations, and I've done plenty of ADHD evaluations in my career at the University of Illinois. So right now in my private practice, I'm really focusing on ADHD. I know that's a big topic nowadays, and a lot of parents of children are wondering, does my child have ADHD? What are the signs and symptoms that I need to look out for? What are the next steps? And so that's what my practice focuses on. And as a homeschooling parent myself, I think, being able to help other families, who may have questions about ADHD is really special. So I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we are very excited to have you here as one of our own as well, and that's one of the reasons that I founded the Homeschool Counseling Network,
Yeah.
was to help bridge that gap. There's a lot of times, even with professionals, as homeschooling families, they can be a little bit skittish, not quite sure if they want to. Well, anyone can have a negative experience with a clinician or with a provider in any given environment that you're seeking services from. But I think it makes it a little bit extra special when you've got a fellow homeschooling parent who also happens to wear a clinician's hat,
Right.
because they're going to understand you better than someone who has not had experience as a homeschooling parent.
Yes.
So that makes me all the more excited to have you with us here today.
Thank you.
Well, for listeners in our audience, can you kind of give us a better understanding of what ADHD is, what types there are, and what the signs and symptoms are, so parents can have a little bit more background and understanding?
Sure. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, right? And so, it's really an impairment with what we call executive functioning. And so, executive functioning are all of the higher level cognitive functionings that we all need, like planning, organization, things like being able to, regulate your emotions, being able to think ahead, and think about potential consequences of different actions, looking at all the options and trying to decide which option will be the best fit. And so it's an impairment in those higher level cognitive areas. And so, it is something that starts in childhood. It's one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders in childhood. And we know that, I believe the stats right now, it's probably higher since COVID, but, it's like probably over 10% of children are diagnosed with ADHD. And there's two types of ADHD. So there's the predominantly inattentive presentation, and then, actually there's three types. So there's the predominantly inattentive presentation, predominantly hyperactive presentation, and then the combined presentation. So the inattentive presentation, it's, what you would, children who zone out, who can't stay focused on a task. They might not necessarily be hyperactive, but, they might be the ones in class who maybe get overlooked, right? They're not acting out. They don't have behavioral problems, but they're not paying attention. They're thinking about other things. It might be the kid in class who, as the teacher's talking, they choose to, read a book under their desk, right? And do other things. And then there's the hyperactive presentation. Those are the kids who just can't sit still, who are kind of all over the place, who will blurt out answers, not wait their turn, maybe say inappropriate things, not really think about the consequences of their actions. And then there's the combined presentation, which is kind of a combination of both of them. And as I mentioned, this is something that starts in childhood, right? And so a lot of people will request an ADHD evaluation and say, hey, I think I have ADHD. I have all of these symptoms. But oftentimes when I look at their history and gather background information, sometimes, their symptoms start in adulthood. And if that's the case, it's most likely not ADHD. There's probably something else going on. And so this is something that starts in childhood. So any evaluation for ADHD requires a very thorough history of when symptoms started and all of the background information, information about childhood, and all of that. So, and there's so many reasons why a child may be hyperactive, and there's so many different reasons why a child may be inattentive. And so I know that many parents, when they see that their child is struggling in those areas, the first thing that comes to mind is ADHD, and it may very well be ADHD, but I think it's also important for parents to know that there could be so many other reasons why a child might be hyperactive or inattentive.
Yes, and I think that also is the point of why it's good to have an evaluation.
Right,
Because it can rule it in and it can give you options of what you need or how best you can proceed. And especially as homeschooling parents, we granted homeschool laws vary from state to state, so your requirements for what you're supposed to teach or what records you're required to keep are
right,
going to vary obviously from state to state. But you definitely have more leeway with how you can accommodate for your child in your homeschool. And so if you are wanting to rule it in, if it's ruled in after your assessment, then you can advise the parent on how best to proceed and how best to help. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself as we talk about how to make, and we're going to talk about a little bit later on, how
yeah,
to sort of structure your homeschool and make a homeschool ADHD friendly environment, if you will, in your homeschool. But that's just ruling it in. Also, through an evaluation, you could rule it out and see if something else is going on instead, and
right,
then how best to proceed in another direction.
right, yeah, yeah. Oh,
What would you say to? Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
no, 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 you go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. What would you say to parents? I was actually talking with some other fellow friends who are clinicians in a couple of different areas from OT to PT. And a lot of times parents hold that fear of getting that assessment or of getting that evaluation. What would you say to parents if for kind of combating that fear over, because sometimes it's the fear of the unknown, if you will. But what would you say to parents if they have a fear about seeking out an
Yeah,
evaluation for their child?
yeah. You know, I think there's probably multiple reasons why parents fear having an evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure some parents will fear, the what ifs of what if my child does have ADHD? What does that mean
Yes.
for my child? And how can I best support my child as a homeschooling parent? I think there's also the fear of what if my child doesn't have ADHD? What does that mean for me? I don't have, I need answers. What if my child doesn't? And then what am I left to do? What supports or what help can I get if it turns out my child doesn't have ADHD? And so I definitely encounter both of those fears when I see clients. What I would say to parents is, you know, um, you will never know until you have an evaluation either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the good things about getting an evaluation for parents in particular who fear the diagnosis of ADHD
Yes.
is um, when you have an answer and when you can put a label on something and say this is why my child is struggling, this is what my child has, then you have so much more resources and options for treatment, for additional support, for support groups. And so if you are someone who is struggling with a child who may have ADHD and you're fearful about that diagnosis, it will just give you that much more options, right? And one thing that I tell my clients, who are fearful about having any kind of diagnosis is, the evaluation, it's yours to keep. You can do what you want with the
Mm-hmm.
report. If you
Yes.
want, you can just put it in the shredder and forget about it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really up to you what you do with that
Mm-hmm.
information. So if you want that information and you decide to use that for additional resources and to get some help, great. If you decide I don't want, put it in the shred. I mean, you can do what you want, right? So it's really up to you, and you have full authority over what you do with that information. I would hope that parents and, people would use that information for additional resources and help. But,
Right.
there are people for very legitimate reasons. They're fearful of having any sort of diagnosis or any sort of
Yes.
label on their children, which, I can understand that as well.
Hmm.
So you have full authority, you have full rights to that information. It's confidential, and so that's what I would say to parents who are fearful of having any sort of diagnosis. Now, for the parents who are fearful of what if my child doesn't have ADHD, because, that fear is real as well.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
the purpose of a comprehensive ADHD evaluation is to not just um, not just see whether or not your child has ADHD, but to figure out why your child is struggling. And so, if it turns out that your child does not have ADHD, a good comprehensive evaluation will see what else is going on. It will assess for other things and try to figure out why your child is struggling. And it may be that your child has other mental health conditions like ADHD, or not ADHD, like anxiety or depression. Maybe there's other environmental factors that are contributing to their struggles. And it could just be a lot of other things, which is why, I said in the beginning that any evaluation will do a very comprehensive, a very thorough interview of their history and background so that, we can really figure out what's going on.
Yes, to pretty much sum up, I think what you're really saying is what I've said in some things before is, knowledge is power. It helps you. It just gives you information, and we could go off on a completely other show on another day about the protection of records and why some parents might not want someone else to be privy to that information. And the importance of, insurance and third parties whatsoever, and using that information. We could spend all day doing that, and I'm
Right,
not going to go down that rabbit hole today. But yeah, the important thing is that with the comprehensive evaluation, meaning you're going to look at so many different areas. You're going to give several different instruments or several different questionnaires or several different tests or assessments. And it means that you're going to be able to, the more information that you have, a closer look you're going to get at your child, a closer look you're going to get at the environment and what's going on, and then you can decide how best to proceed. I think the biggest takeaway is don't fear the label, because a label is just, whether you rule the diagnosis in or you rule the diagnosis out. If the label is there, if the label is not there, if a different label is
right,
there, the point is, a label is just one part. It's just one part of your
right,
child. It's not who
right,
your child is as a whole, but it's information that can help you work with your child.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So some parents may be a little intimidated by the evaluation process itself. Can you help kind of share what is involved? We talked a little bit about gathering background information and being a great historian, since it is a diagnosis that has to, I guess the best way of putting that is to say it must present or must show up first, the symptoms early in childhood. Even if it's diagnosed later, there has to be evidence of it, you were explaining, in childhood for it to be a true diagnosis. But for parents who may think they need to have an evaluation for their child, what is involved in that process? Can you discuss that with us a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So an ADHD evaluation will typically last anywhere from 3 to 4 hours, maybe a little longer than that, depending on, what other factors are, you need to consider. And so it will consist of like I said, a very thorough interview of
Mm-hmm.
current symptoms, functioning at home, functioning at school, social relationships, family relationships, when symptoms started, a brief medical, history, mental health history, any relevant information like that. And so the interview typically will last about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Um,
Okay.
and then some questionnaire forms, So depending on the age of the child, if the child is a little older, the child will complete some self-rating forms themselves. And also typically the parent or a teacher, and for, homeschooling parents, it'll probably just be the parents, will fill out this, right, the rating form as well. Depending on, and it really depends on the child and, what their background looks like and what other factors the clinician has to consider. But they might do some tasks on the computer, looking at different cognitive areas. They might do some tasks one-on-one with the clinician where they, maybe look at pictures or work with blocks or figure out, problems and, things like that. And so it's a multiple, multifaceted approach of looking at, okay, rating forms, but also looking at their history and then also their actual cognitive profile using, tasks on the computer or face to face. And so it's really about looking at, okay, do they have symptoms currently? When did symptoms start? What are their cognitive strengths and weaknesses? And then are there other potential factors that could be contributing to this other than ADHD? So a really good comprehensive eval will also look at that as well. Like, are there any other possible reasons why this child may be struggling other than ADHD? That's a big part of the evaluation as well.
Okay. So can you explain a little bit more, kind of breaking it down a little bit further? What do you mean by cognitive processes? Kind of break that down in like layman's terms for our audience.
Sure. So cognitive processes like, attention, their ability to focus, sustained attention, so their ability to maintain focus for a long time. Um, Things like impulse control, so managing their impulses. Um, and and I mentioned executive functioning. So there's a lot of tests that you can use to measure their executive functioning abilities. So things like planning, problem solving, all of those things. And I was going to say something else, but I lost it. So, but that's pretty much, that's pretty much what it is. Looking at the symptoms of ADHD. Oh, and the other thing I was going to mention is behavioral observation is a big part of it as well.
Yes.
That's a very big part. So, there's tests you can use to measure impulse control and, things like that. But a good clinician will also, observe the child and see how they manage stressful situations, see how they are able to regulate their emotions when, things get a little challenging. And so behavioral observations are also a big part of that as well.
So as you're doing these tests and talking with the parent and then even talking with the child, oftentimes you're just making a lot of your observations right there with how the child is interacting with you and behaving with you right there
Right.
in the session. And because a lot of times these tests, for lack of a better way of putting it, I know I don't even like that word tests. Instrument, measure is probably better, because a lot of times when you give that word test, people immediately freak out as though it's a pass
Right.
or fail type of
Right.
situation. And it's really not. Probably
Yeah.
assessment's not even a great word either.
Yeah.
Instrument. We'll go with instrument, because I feel
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
seems to be probably a better word for that. Because a lot of times if you use the word test, people automatically think, oh my goodness,
Right.
is this pass or fail, or what is my score?
Right.
Well, it's just not really like that.
Yeah.
But it can be, a lot of times as you're going through the different tasks, which a lot of times for kids is just playing. For them, a lot of times it's, like you said, it's playing with blocks. It's depending on if it's for certain IQ measures, or if it's on academic achievement measures. Because a lot of times, depending on your evaluation, two types of tests can go in with that. And the behavioral observations you were talking about, a lot of times it's just a questionnaire that a parent will fill out for you. And in
Mm-hmm.
addition to whatever you're looking at. So it's not as intimidating or as daunting as it seems. It's certainly not anything to be frightened of.
Oh no, yeah. And when I've done evaluations with kids in the past, we make it fun and we'll take
Yes.
breaks and before we get started, we'll kind of chat and how was your day? Like what did you do
Yes.
today? Things like that. So it's really not like, this very scary process. I mean, it's
Right.
most kids find it kind of fun.
They do. They do, actually. In another life, a million years ago, when I was earning my master's degree, I have a good chunk of my master's degree is in psychological assessment.
Okay.
My background is actually, and so I worked for a lot of different psychologists, and now I don't even know what these measures are today because I've not used them since then. The WISC
Right.
probably has the WISC 9 by now, and
Mhm.
that's just an intelligence scale for those of you who,
Right.
when I use those terms, is the Wechsler. I've now forgotten intelligence scale for children. There we go. My
Right.
master's
Yep.
degree's not
Yep.
gone. It's still in my brain somewhere.
Yes.
But there's a lot of different measures that you give for that, or and instruments for that. And it's a lot of them are kind of a lot of fun. They're kind of like games, and a lot of times the kids do not even realize that they are being timed when they're
Right.
being timed on some of these tasks. So
Yeah.
certainly don't let it intimidate you or scare you away from going. And if you can always ask your clinician any question,
Right.
ask them
Oh
anything.
yeah,
They will be
definitely.
more than happy to answer it for you.
Yes.
So, Dr. Hahn, can you tell us what are some challenges of ADHD in the homeschool, and what are some strategies for managing symptoms in children, especially when you are homeschooling your child?
Yeah. Um, I think the biggest challenge that parents face would be, not just focusing on the academics, but they're in a position where they have to teach the academic part, but they also have to manage and regulate behavior and the child's emotions. And so it's really a juggling act for parents of children who have ADHD, because you're not just teaching them academic skills, you're in a position where you have to teach them to regulate their emotions and regulate their behavior. And I think that can be quite challenging for a lot of parents.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I do. You're wearing so many different hats as a homeschool parent, and you usually choose to do it because you know that you can give your child what someone else can't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, nowadays there's so much information online and you can pretty much find anything you want on Google or, wherever. And so, parents have a lot more information, but um, what I would like to tell parents is you really don't have to be a mental health professional to help your child learn these skills. I mean, these, even the most basic skills like helping your child learn how to take deep breaths when they're frustrated. My 3-year-old does that, and so
Right.
yeah, I mean, they're simple things. And
Yes.
so I would encourage parents to utilize the resources, excuse me, utilize the resources that they do have. You don't have to be a professional, but it's really about, creating a positive atmosphere, that's conducive to, well, learning, first of all, but also a positive atmosphere where the child feels supported, safe, where a child feels like they can, you know, talk to their parents about what they're feeling or what they're thinking, and knowing that there's actually someone there who will listen to them, and who is invested in them. And so I think if you can set up that kind of an environment for your child, I mean, you're 70% there,
Oh,
and
yes.
so, even if you're really focused on your science lesson for that day, if it's an atmosphere where the child feels safe and supported, you're already providing them with the emotional support that they need, right? And so,
Yes.
um, I think that's number one, is create that atmosphere for your child. And also number two is, as I briefly mentioned before, I think it's important for children to learn academics, obviously, but it's also important for children to learn skills to regulate and manage their own behaviors and their own emotions. And that goes really for any child, not just for children with ADHD. But, I will say children who have ADHD will have, probably more challenges than the neurotypical child in, regulating their behavior and their emotions. So it's, that much more important for children who do have ADHD to learn those skills. But it really goes for any child that, if you are a home educator, I think you really should be spending that time with your child, helping them learn those skills as well, in addition to academics, right? And so, as I mentioned, things like deep breathing, I do that with my 3-year-old. So when he gets frustrated, I say, do you want to take some deep breaths with me? And he'll just do the deep breaths with me. Knowing when you need to take a pause, right? And so when you both need a pause, right, for the child and for you, right? Knowing when you need to take a pause and knowing what that's going to look like when you do take a pause, right? Are you each going to just go into your rooms and just take a 5-minute break, or are you going to talk about it, or are you going to go outside and play? What is that going to look like? And so really having a plan of when do you know that you need a pause, and what are you going to do during that pause, right? So, and like I said, you don't need a fancy degree to do those things with your kids. Yeah.
No, you really, really don't. I'm laughing as I reach forward here at my camera just a little bit further. Forgive me. I'm laughing. This is what we use in my house.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my
Oh,
son's
okay.
voice.
Yeah, I love that.
We
Yeah.
recorded it. So, yes, I'm telling you, you can get these little buttons on Amazon, have them record their voice, or if your voice is soothing, have them record your voice. But
Right.
yes, I think some of the biggest advice you just gave right there, and sometimes we look for these magical fixes, but really sometimes it's just so simple. It just means that we have to think it through and actually set out a plan for it. We
Right.
know our children better than anyone else. We know when we're about to face that meltdown. We can almost hear the tick, 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 tick. We know, especially better than anyone else. And since at homeschool, we're there's going to be obviously fewer kids in the class. In our case, there's just one because he's an only child. But I can literally see the tick, 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 and it's starting to come. And that's when
Right.
either I'll press it or he'll press it, and that's kind of
Right.
our cue that we need that break. But yes, you know your child better than anyone. You don't need to have a fancy degree to do all of these different things. What you need is a willingness to learn and then a willingness to follow through with what you learn. Surround yourself with people who know more than you do. That's the trick. That's
Yeah.
really the big trick.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think for anything, for any behavioral or emotional issues that come up, I think if you are approaching it as a skill that needs to be taught, I think it really changes your mindset from frustration, which is very understandable and normal. But I think it really does change that mindset from frustration to, okay, this is a skill that my child lacks, so this is an opportunity for me to teach them that skill, right? So.
Yes, and I think I haven't thought about it that way before. Mindset, sure, but a lot of times we take for granted that as adults we've had that life experience, so that's natural to us now. And we
Right.
forget that our children are experiencing these things for the first time, and they don't
Right.
have the benefit of life experience, and things that we feel like should be innate are not always innate, especially if we have a child who's neurodiverse. So
Right.
we have to think of it as, okay, you didn't know how to tie your shoes until I taught you. Well, you might not know how to take a little bit of a brain break, and you might not even realize that when you can't control anything else in this world, you can control the way you breathe, unless you're having an
Right.
asthma attack, completely different situation
Right. That's
entirely.
different.
Totally different, totally different. When you don't have control over anything else, you can control your breath, and it's
Yes.
powerful. It
Oh
is incredibly
yeah.
powerful. But that's true. We forget that these things do have to be taught.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, just approach every opportunity as a teaching moment. And then also just know when to take a break, you know. Um,
You
yeah,
can and
so
you should.
you really should. You really should. Yeah. And parents are humans too. I mean, we get frustrated, we get, fed up and, all those emotions. And so knowing when you need a break, I think is very important as well. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, really, creating an environment that, is conducive to learning, and so, whether that means, making sure that your environment is distraction free or looking at different seating options, depending on the age of your child. So, using a standing desk, experimenting with a stability ball, a bean bag, trying out different things. And obviously, it will depend on the age of your child, but, being open to, a different environment, seeing what
Mhm.
works for your child, even things as simple as, switching their chair to something else might, make a big difference.
Oh and it can be something so small that you would think would be obvious, but sometimes it's not obvious. But that is where
Right.
an evaluation comes in, and that is where the information that someone like you can also help provide to parents. You'll see me kind of twist in my chair here. I need to move. And it's
Yeah.
almost that's kind of my stem. I have to have moved. That's why I have a roller chair, and so I kind of
Mhm.
have to have that movement.
Yeah.
But yes, why not? Why not do it because you can? You
Yeah.
absolutely can. Take that freedom.
Oh
Absolutely, that's
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or take your learning outside if it's a sunny day,
oh
and
yes.
that's the beauty of homeschooling, right? Is that you have that freedom, and why not take it? Yeah.
Oh, we do. I love it. I know one thing that I'm absolutely guilty of, and I'll say this. So here you go, listeners. I might have a master's degree and I might have a license, but there's times when all of that education in the world doesn't do me a bit of good because I'm still just a homeschooling mom at heart with my child. And I have found myself, it's a habit I had to learn to break of, oh, well, we've just got one more lesson. Let's just get this one more thing to do. Come on, let's just power through. We can do it. Yes. And then I have to remember it's not that I'm ignoring the tick, tick, tick. I just
Right.
miss it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that happens to you, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. That's where grace comes in.
Right. Right.
But once you're aware of it, when you know better, you do better.
Right.
That's when
Exactly.
you're like, okay. And so now when I do that, my child has learned how to communicate with me. That's when he's pressing it, going, okay,
Right.
mom,
Right.
I need a break. Got it. So teach your child that it's okay to say that to you, and then also be receptive to that when they say,
Right.
hey, I need a break.
Right,
Hey, I
exactly.
need,
And that's that, creating that atmosphere
yes.
where the child feels like they can say, "Hey, I need a break right now." And,
Mhm.
and they're going to be met with a positive response to that. So,
Absolutely. And you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days because
right.
it just goes with it. It's okay.
Yep.
Tomorrow is a new day.
Yep.
Tomorrow
Yep.
is a new day.
Yes.
So, Dr. Hahn, and all that we've been talking about, from emotional well being to going through the testing process to creating a homeschool environment that is conducive to learning, what I've really heard more than anything throughout this interview is that, how they used to say that the three R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, if you will, that kids learn. For me, what I'm hearing is the most important R out of everything for homeschooling your child is let that first R be relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely pour into your child. I mean, for all of the reasons that you may have, personal or otherwise, for homeschooling, by far one of our biggest reasons for homeschooling was to have that relationship with our child, to have a positive relationship with our child, to teach them these life skills
Right.
that will help him grow throughout his life. So, for all of that, relationship, definitely relationship is the
Yes.
first thing that you're focusing on.
Hmm.
But now let's switch gears just a little bit. I have had several friends who have said, oh, I just don't know how you homeschool. I would love to do that. But, and it's always the yes, but, and then follows more information.
Hmm.
I have ADHD. So, can we speak to maybe the parents, homeschooling parents who have ADHD? Maybe their children do not, but they do. Can we kind of switch gears and talk about that? What would you have to say to homeschooling parents who have ADHD themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I think for anyone who has ADHD, I think finding a good support group is absolutely essential, really. Having a community of people who get you and who understand what's going on and can relate to what you're experiencing, I think is key. So either finding a group of adults, who have ADHD or other homeschooling families, I think that's very important. The other thing that I would say is, you know, there's so many different strategies. If you Google, how to manage ADHD for adults, I mean, you'll get a million different, listings and ideas. And so there's a lot of things you can do. If I could choose just one thing that I would recommend for parents who have ADHD would be to know what is realistic for you, and keep things simple. That's actually two things, but I think that's I think that's probably the big thing that I would recommend for parents who have ADHD and who are homeschooling their children and feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling like they're drowning. Know what is realistic for you and keep things simple. Really, the beauty of homeschooling is that it doesn't look like traditional school. I mean, that's really the beauty of it, right? And so, and it's not a rat race. You're not comparing yourself to other kids or other homeschooling families. And so, really take a good look at what is realistic for you, depending on the age of your children, how many children you have, whether you have extra help from someone else, really like looking at your lifestyle, looking at what you are capable of doing, and really setting, an appropriate expectation. And then keeping things simple, what I will tell people is, either for that particular month, for that week, even for that particular homeschooling year, really set one or two priorities that you have for that season, and really build your homeschool around those top one, maybe top two priorities, and really keep things simple. I think for anyone with ADHD, keeping your life as simple as possible is really key. The more that you have on your plate, well, this is for anyone. The more that you have on your plate, it's just harder, right? And it's going to be significantly more harder for people who have ADHD, right? And so, really thinking about what is like your number one or number two goal for homeschooling for that week, month, year, and really focus on that. And the other things, you can set aside, for a time where you have a little more freedom, but really focus on what is most important for you. And that's going to look different for each homeschooling family. But I think that will keep things simple. I think that will keep things manageable. And I think that will probably make it more pleasurable for homeschooling parents, not feeling overwhelmed, not dreading their day, right? And so I think the less stressed you are, the better it is for your child. And you wouldn't want your child going to a traditional school, spending 8 hours a day with a teacher who's stressed, right? And fed up and, cranky. You wouldn't want that for your child. So, I think it's important for parents to realize that, you don't want that for your child at home either, right? And so let's keep things simple and really focus on what really matters. And again, that's going to look different for each family. So it's up to each parent to decide what that's going to look like for them.
So very true, and such wise advice. Absolutely. ADHD aside or not, just such
Yeah,
wise
yeah,
advice.
yeah, yeah.
Goals. Hashtag goals.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I think, um, when you're homeschooling, you're bombarded with so much information, and you need to do this, or you need to do that, or this curriculum, that curriculum, this style of homeschooling, and there's so much information out there, which is great, but it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I can imagine, parents who have ADHD, I mean, this is a challenge for them to keep track of everything and organize and feel like they have to do all these things. But the simpler it is, I think the better. I would encourage that for any homeschooling family, but especially for those parents who have ADHD.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Give yourself grace and keep out of that comparison trap because
Right,
it is
right.
so
It's
easily
easy to
done.
do that, but yeah, it's not helpful. So, yeah.
No, it's not. It's really not. Well, Dr. Hahn, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on today, and thank you for providing such a wealth of information to other homeschooling families out here. I say other because you are one of us as well, but, kind of taking the fear out of that evaluation process and removing the stigma of the labels and giving us some very useful tips and tricks for helping promote such positive relationships with our children, which is we want key more than anything else in our homeschool, and for helping us keep it simple because that is just vital information for all of us, but certainly vital information if you are a homeschooling parent with
Yeah.
ADHD. So, where can potential clients or our audience members find you?
Yes. So, you can find me on my website, www.maplepsychological.com. And so, you can check out my website. I'm also on ZenCare, so zencare.com, zencare.com. You can look up my name. You can schedule a 10-minute phone consult if you have more questions or have questions about my services. That's another way you can reach out as well.
Well, thank you so much. And we are very excited to have you as part of the Homeschool Counseling Network. And we might talk to you again in the future. We'll see. But thank you
Yeah,
so
that would
much
be
for
great.
being a part of our little village, as I like to call it, and for providing us with the information that you did today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
It's been a pleasure. The Homeschool Counseling Network recognizes the comfort of having a community. We offer the Homeschool Counseling Network Public Resource Sharing Group, a public group on Facebook where individuals, organizations, families, and professionals are welcome to openly share information and resources. Looking to learn from a particular specialist or educator in one of these fields? Reach out and let us know. You can send us your comments and questions to Kimberly Bennett, LPC, at outlook.com or by commenting in the public Facebook group. With the Homeschool Counseling Podcast, we are working to bridge the gap between professionals and homeschooling families. Are you searching for a professional in your area to help support your family on your homeschooling journey? Visit our website at www.homeschoolcounselingnetwork.com. Look under the Parents tab where you will find a subcategory, Find a Professional. Here you will find lists of service providers organized by areas of specialty in 4 main categories: academic advising, counseling and mental health, testing, therapy, and tutoring. We've also added some new categories: professional coaching and courses and classes. Providers are also categorized by state, population served, and areas of expertise. Credentials and contact information are also included. Also on our website, you'll find a variety of digital media, including blog posts, free downloads, and a searchable free resource library covering a range of topics relevant to homeschooling, education, therapy, and mental health. Content is created by me, Kimberly Bennett, your host, and some professional friends and fellow homeschooling parents that I have met along the way in my family's homeschooling journey. By collaborating with service providers and professionals in the community, strategic partners, donors, sponsors, and advertisers who share our vision and believe in our mission, we endeavor to provide free quality resources to inspire, inform, and improve the lives of homeschooling families. Are you a professional interested in partnering with us? Visit our website and click on the Professionals tab. You can join our network and have your business or practice listed among our multiple resource lists for free. Have a heart for service? Would you like to pour your knowledge into the homeschooling community? Consider contributing content to our free resource library. There are multiple opportunities to participate, including writing guest blog posts, recording a guest blog, or sharing downloads or printables. Looking for a wider reach? Coming soon! HCN will offer paid advertising opportunities. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at homeschoolcounselingnetwork.com to keep updated with all of our latest developments. Education is a journey that we are not meant to take alone. There is great comfort in community. Until we meet again, thanks for being part of our village.